Hi, my name is Rachel Dill, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Pathway to Possible. I'm really looking forward to this discussion that we're going to be having today. My sister Jenny is a 35-year-old adult with disabilities, and she is an older sibling to me. It's just the two of us.
Hi, I'm Jeff Behrens. I have a sister, Kim Behrens, who lives at Orchard Ave with Pathway to Possible. And Kim entered our life as an adopted sister many, many years ago. And I also serve on the board as chair of the board this year for Pathway to Possible.
I'm Brian Oates. I live in Newton. I am a friend of Pathways to Possible. It's probably the best way to describe me. And I am the younger sibling of my brother Justin, who has some intellectual disabilities.
And hi, I'm Melissa Allen, and my sister lives in the Orchard Ave house with Pathway to Possible. She's my older sister. And I am also on the board and interested to have this chat today.
I guess I want to start off, and I'll share a story that I have, but I always think it's interesting, from the time that you all were children, when you realized that your sibling really was different than you, or when you realized that they had a disability, when your parents maybe explained it to you, or you figured it out on your own. I think something that always stands out to me, to this day, when I was really young, starting off in elementary school, my sister, when we were really young, she was going to public school in my town of Sharon, and she was on the school bus with me. And I remember kids on the school bus were just really mean to her. And I'm 2 years younger than her, and I didn't really understand why they were being mean to her and not necessarily to other people. And it really stuck with me, and I think I would go home to my parents and say, they're being mean to Jenny, I don't understand. And my parents, however old I was, 5 years old at the time, they tried to explain it to me in a way that they thought would make sense to a 5-year-old, but I just remember being very upset about it, because these were kids that, were in the neighborhood, and times were very different back then. And I'm sure all of your experiences, times have evolved so much in terms of the way that people treat individuals with disabilities, but that story sticks out in my mind as just being very impactful, being such a young kid and people just making fun of my sister and bullying her for no apparent reason other than the fact that she was different to them.
So I remember, I think I was a second grader, so what was I, 7 or 8 or something, and Kim had been adopted 2 years early, right when she was born, so she was like a newborn with no good information on her medical history. I think my parents didn't expect any issues with disabilities, and maybe a year, 18 months into her living with us, so maybe she was around 2, she had a seizure. And we were living actually in Natick, so not so far from here. And all I remember is running to this neighbor who became a huge dear friend over our entire lives, Mrs. Muscovian, Mrs. M, who's a nurse who came down. And that's when we started to realize there was something going on with Kim. But it took many years, and she's kind of got an unusual constellation of how she presents with her disabilities, both intellectual and physical, and probably associated with some sort of issue at birth, a traumatic birth or something, which again wasn't documented because she was like left at a doorstep at the police department in Seoul, Korea or something.
My story isn't quite as dramatic. So I guess if I realized that my brother Justin was different than when I did was when I was going to kindergarten, and I was going to James Russell Lowell Middle School right around the corner from my house. My brother was at a different school, and I would ask why is he at a different school than the one that I'm going to, the one my siblings went to, and my parents kind of just globally explained that he has different abilities and different opportunities and different challenges than you'll have, so he's at a different spot with people that are going to help him get the best out of his abilities.
And I think for me, so I'm 3 years younger than my sister, the only two. My parents were older. They met later in life. They got married later in life. They had my sister later in life, which is probably, the primary reason she has Down syndrome. And she's quite low functioning. She's physically able and she gets involved, but, very low verbal, clearly visually looks as she has Down syndrome. I was the one that got adopted into the family. And so, and my parents had a great family network. My dad was the oldest of 9. My mom had 2 close brothers. And so I never really thought too much of it. I felt like we were kind of equals at a very young age. But there was so much love and support in our family, I didn't think anything of it. But then I had somewhat similar experience to you, Rachel. What I think back on is being in the supermarket. And I remember, I don't know what age I was, definitely grade school. And I remember some days I'd go to the market and I would be all proud and tough. Why do people have to stare at her? That used to upset me so much. Then there would be other times that I'd walk down the other aisle because I couldn't really handle it. And I knew I loved my sister and that we were different, but it was very hard to have an older sister that I was passing beyond. And so those are probably my first recollections of understanding the difference and, growing to work with it.
Yeah. And I think that's, an interesting point you bring up. Obviously, at times you are so happy and proud of your sibling for who they are, especially as you develop into an adult, teenager, whatever it may be. But I think back to when I was younger and it was just my sister and I remember I would ask my parents to have another baby, like daily. Even my mom's like, Rachel, I think you asked us to have a baby until you were like 15 years old. Because I really wanted to have another sibling that I felt like I could relate to a little bit better. And I remember when I was a kid, I would always, so my sister, when we would play together, it would always be like me leading her, okay, we're going to play with these dolls of mine, or we're going to play with this like Lego set. And I remember we'd go into her room and I'd close the door and I'd say, you can't get out, you have to play with this toy with me. And she'd be okay with it because, she looked up to me as an older sibling because I was kind of the one that was like, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. And it was just it almost set up, even though birth order, she's older, it's set up as me kind of taking on the role as, her mentor and the person that she looked up to, because that's just always how it was. I mean, even from the time I was very young, that's how my parents started to realize something was off. I was 2 years younger and I was starting to develop ahead of her. Her language wasn't really developing. And there were just certain things that my parents were noticing, like, this is off. Like, our daughter Rachel is 2 years younger, but she's starting to speak, or she's starting to do this, and Jenny's still not doing that. So I guess I'm curious what some of your experiences are. Like, obviously, there's so many amazing memories, but, times where you realize maybe I, shouldn't have done this, or if I, treated my sibling in a way where I almost feel bad about it just because, that's just how it had been at times, I guess.
My brother is 2 years younger than me, so I'm the oldest, and my brother, and then Kim is 3 or 4 years younger than my brother. So, it's always me and my brother who are pretty close growing up, and more energy, rambunctious, and our little sister. So like that dynamic, it's not normalizing is the wrong word, but sort of it didn't feel, although Kim had her unusual behaviors and she doesn't talk well at all and she drools and her intellectual disabilities, but she felt just sort of like, yeah, that's our, weird, annoying little sister, and she's a brat like all little sisters are a brat, in sort of a good way. She's a super social person, and those who know her, she's, in spite of her language deficit, she knows everybody and has friends all over, and her Christmas list is, 45 people long. But that started when she was really little. She was always super connected. I don't know, I guess that's just part of who she is. So, it's funny, when I think back, I remember those very early memories when we first realized some of her issues. But then there was a lot of years growing up where I think my parents and my mom, because my parents ended up getting divorced, were very focused. Mom was focused on getting Kim into the right programs and right supports. Mm-hmm. But, Kim had great schools, Framingham public schools, and then a couple of private school things, and then Lexington, the Lab Collaborative, where she met a bunch of people that we all know and people she lives with today. And, she was just like a bratty, annoying, sometimes cute, sometimes adorable, sometimes hateful little sister. I don't know. That's not exactly what you asked, but that's what I remember.
I'm probably romanticizing a little bit, but so I'm the youngest of 5. My brother Justin is most close to me in age. He's 3 years older than me. So we grew up kind of in parallel spheres in some way in terms of I had Little League, he had Special Olympics, and I had in-town basketball, and he had swimming, and so there was never any. Um, my brother Justin, for our family and for really our friend group, like, is just a positive force of energy. So it was. I think everybody, you know, quickly acknowledged that he was different, but different didn't mean bad, and different didn't mean problematic. It just meant different, right? So it was amazing to see some of the kindness that he would evoke in friends and people that, on the by and large, not universally, but he was kind of a connector even way back as a young kid because I think people like my brother and your siblings, they kind of bring out more often than not, they bring out the best in people. And so even as a young kid, it was awesome to see him win a Special Olympics medal, or awesome to see him go to Austria or California or Minnesota and have his own experiences. So his world was just different, but it wasn't any worse, certainly, than the rest of our siblings.
And you had so many siblings. Like, do you feel like each and every one of your siblings, obviously you being the youngest and then having those older siblings, do you feel like you all had that similar thought about Justin and just similar relationships to him? Or do you feel like because you were the youngest, you looked up to him a little bit more than some of your older siblings may have based on the age difference?
I think as the youngest, you probably have a gilded view of the world, period, depending, regardless of where you are. But I think it might have been more responsibility for my older siblings, but I didn't know any better, so he just he did what he did, and we were really proud of him, and he was happy and fulfilled, with the path that he was on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would mirror most of what was said. I think to your initial question, also being just the two of us like you and being the younger sibling, I think especially while I was still in sort of K to 12 and going through your own growing up, I think for the most part, yeah, these siblings taught us a lot about kindness and diversity and what have you. But I'm not gonna lie, emotions get to you too, and some days you do kind of say to yourself, I wasn't really nice to her today because I really could have used a big sister today, or something like that. So that happens, and it's part of growing up, and the good outweighs the bad, but those days crept in here and there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting that you say, I feel like I feel worse when I think I've, maybe ignored my sister's phone call, or maybe have been short with her because, I'm frustrated about life, whatever it may be, work, versus, I feel like if my sibling didn't have a disability, I don't know if I would necessarily feel as bad. I feel like, siblings get into fights all the time, and similar to you, Melissa, like, obviously just being the two of us, it's, my sister will call me, and I don't love talking on the phone. So sometimes I'll say to her, I don't feel like talking on the phone. I'll call you tomorrow. And then I realize, to her, talking to me on the phone is everything. She, especially during these times, talking on the phone brings her back to her family and brings her back to some sense of reality. And I almost have to sometimes reevaluate. Okay, Rachel, you might not feel like talking on the phone right now, or you might be short with her because you're frustrated about other things, but don't let that get to your relationship. And I think similar to now as an adult versus when I was a kid, I think, I definitely realized at a younger age that, you almost need to think of the situation and understand it more, which I feel like we all probably did and do. It's not the same dynamic as if, your sibling doesn't have a disability. I feel like you have to be somewhat more sensitive, and you want to be because you don't want to hurt them, and you want to maintain that special relationship. And I feel like one thing for me is I could ignore my sister's calls for a week, and she would still be calling me and say, hi, Rachel, how are you? How's your week going? Like, it wouldn't even faze her. And, in a another relationship, I feel like maybe, someone would be like, what the hell? Like, why haven't you answered me? I don't understand it. It's rude. So I think, just kind of bringing yourself down and recognizing those things that, you wouldn't necessarily, you know, think that, I feel like you have to kind of think through everything that you might, like behaviors you might be having and things that you might be doing before you necessarily do them. Or if you do it and then trying to, now I'm rambling. But so going back to childhood, so to me, so I grew up in Sharon, Massachusetts, and I feel like to me, I'm still very close with all my childhood friends. They're my best friends. I've known them my whole life, even more so than my college friends. And I feel like some of the reasons why I feel like I'm so close with them still is because of how they embraced my sister and how they embraced just, the population of, kids and adults with disabilities and the understanding that they have. And I'm curious, with your friendships, whether they're friendships that you've had from the time you were children through college, now, how have people embraced the relationships, or how have people embraced, your sibling and, the fact that they do have a disability?
It's funny because I guess Kim is unusual in lots of ways, right? So she's Korean, she's adopted, she has intellectual disability, she has physical disabilities, and she's got this incredibly strong personality, right? And all those things are unusual or unique. And so, in a lot of ways, I feel like friends. She was just part of my life, like any like my brother, or even probably did more so. My brother ended up going to college out west and then living out in Denver. So, growing up and then as a young adult and through now, I think she was just sort of an important part of my life, and it wasn't really sort of a topic. It was just sort of like, there's this unusual and interesting person, Kim, and she's part of the package. So whether it was a girlfriend or my wife or other close friends, whatever, it's just sort of, this is part of the family. It wasn't sort of unusual or, I would say, special in the normal way. Special is normal or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
I don't know where to go with that, but in terms of my brother Justin, he is an incredibly unifying part of our family. So I have 3 boys, and I love them. ... or not quite exclamation point, but they fight and they compete and they are not always supportive, and they could be more thoughtful and they could be more caring. And with my brother Justin, it was never a competitive thing at all. It was always a additive thing. So, and again, he helps bring out the most thoughtful part of people and the most generous part of people. And, we might be fortunate or Pollyanna-ish, but even as a kid, he broadened our horizons, even though his world is fairly limited, like just to see all the people that he could meet or introduce us to, or a lot of the good that the different path that he's on, you don't realize that. Certainly as a younger sibling, you don't have a choice, and these are things you think about or wish for, but it's like, hey, this is awesome. Like, we get to do this, and we would never have done this. We would never met these people were not for Justin's differences. And so it's, I would say it was rare, but not isolated. That I was like, oh, I wish my brother were different, where I could throw the football with him and compete, and whatever. Like, if we shot baskets, it wasn't making me a better basketball player, but it was just good time together, right?
Yeah.
And so it's, I'm sure there may be some terrible things that I've forgotten, but
Well, it's good that all the special good things outweigh any of the negative things. Or obviously there's frustrating times over the course of your life with anyone, but I think it's good to see all the positive things and the way that he's impacted you and your life and your family's life. It seems like he's such an important aspect to your family dynamic that you couldn't imagine not having him part of it.
My other siblings would vote me off the island before they would vote him off. He's for a lot of reasons.
I feel like I would get voted off the island, and it's just 2 of us. So
Well, there was a lot said there that I could touch on. I guess again, your initial question. Yeah, Annie. Likewise. I mean, she brings out the best in people, and she is lower functioning. So again, people meet her, and I'm sure more often than not are kind of like, what do I say? What is she saying? It's a little awkward, but their kindness comes out. And like with my kids, I have a couple teenage boys who can be very narcissistic. But if I say, I've got to go do this or that for Annie, nothing, okay, they do whatever's asked. That she is a priority. As for my network of friends and growing up, I wouldn't say, I think that would again fall into a category where I never had friends that I felt couldn't handle or didn't learn from her. But I don't have some of my friends who are my good friends because of meeting them through, a Special Olympics network or something like that. I do think I hit, excuse me, the teens, and I did really want my own path. Because being only two, a lot of your path, and especially if you're same sex as I am, two girls, a lot of my path was her. And I don't regret a second of it for what it's taught me. But I think I then launched into, got the chance to go to college, got away, have my own life, not defined by that. So yeah, everybody that comes into and is part of my world is accepting and respectful and loving, but they didn't start in my life through that avenue.
Yeah. And I feel like, Melissa, you bring up another point where I feel like I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Obviously you got the opportunity to go to college, you have a family, you have kids, you own your own home. So for me, I feel like with my path throughout life, whether it was going to college, graduating, getting married, now I just had a baby, I feel like those are situations where, my sister, most likely, she's higher functioning in terms of her social capabilities, but in terms of, she's very social, you'll meet her, she'll talk your ear off, but, in terms of those relationships, she needs support, she needs a staff, she's in a group home, not a Pathway to Possible home, hopefully that's down the line, but I think, her wanting to know why she can't get married or why she can't have children, or she technically could, but I think those are always, I feel like over the course of my life I studied abroad, and I feel like there's always been, I'm so excited for the opportunities that I've been given, but I've always, I always somewhat feel bad because sometimes my sister will ask, can I get married, or why do I have to live in this house with other people? And I think it's definitely a tough balance, because I know, whether or not your sibling understands that they're different or doesn't understand at all, they're seeing you go through your life and doing all these things that, they're not necessarily doing. So I'm curious, with every level of, each of your siblings, how, have they ever asked? I know, you said Kim doesn't have language, but do you feel like she knows that she'll probably be in a group home for her life, and is she okay with that? I think there's obviously people that I think understand it and know it and are happy and accept it, but I also feel like I'm sure there's certain things throughout their lives that they're like, oh, why couldn't I do that? Why couldn't I go on this trip? Or even if they're not necessarily able to express it in a way where they fully understand it.
Kim is interesting because although she's really hard to understand, and she presents, if you first meet her, you'll probably think she's much more sort of compromised disabled than she is. She drools again, she doesn't really, she speaks in a way that's really hard to understand. Though over time you can learn to understand it. But there's a lot going on there, so, she, again, has, like several of our siblings, has lots of friends, all these relationships. She really wanted to live independently, and so in her 20s, she started in I guess it was a shared living thing with sort of an able-bodied adult and Kim, and that lasted for a few years, but it just wasn't a great fit. I think it was in some ways more isolating than not. And then she moved into a Pathway to Possible house pretty early on in her late 20s or early 30s. I forget exactly when. And she loved that. I mean, for her, that was, it's her version of living independently, living with friends, people again that she went to high school with. So for her, living independently versus living at home.
Right.
So I think it was always sort of the context of, I don't want to live with mom. I want to be on my own. I'm happy to go home a couple times a year, but I get in fights with mom, like, so everyone does. In some ways she's still in an adolescent stage, even though she's in her 40s. She, in some ways, develops in a different way. And so there was times in the last 10 years where she was fighting with my mom, like any 12 or 15-year-old adolescent girl would, and I'd see them fighting. They're like, this is nuts, but it's sort of classic, I guess.
Yeah.
And not having another sister. So, I think she has been, I don't know how, I guess she's got to be aware at some level, but again, I feel like to a certain degree, her life, given her context, is pretty, not universally awesome, but has a lot of great things to it. I mean, there's been some really hard things too, but overall, she loves working. She has this great job at TJ Maxx. She's had great jobs working with animals. She's had great jobs over the years. She loves her work. Yeah. She loves who she lives with. She loves living independently. She loves so many things that she does. And she's a little nuts about reminding us about birthdays and other holidays. And so she will warn me every time there's a family member about to have a birthday. She's the one who reminds me to be in touch with Uncle Tom. His birthday was this day. Please call him. And like, thanks, Kim. I would have forgotten.
That.
And
That's
it's great.
perfect.
Like, that's her role in the family. One of her roles in the family.
Yeah.
So I think from her perspective, as best as I can put myself in her head, she's got a pretty good life. Now, she'll text me once in a while, and she's gotten into a fight with Deb, who runs the house or something, or she pushes against the limit. She's like, I want to leave. I want to move out. I want my own apartment. I'm sick of this. Like, I understand, Kim. I get that feeling too. Sometimes I want to leave my wife, but right now we're doing, so you guess that. And we all get along really well. But there is times when she gets, you get angry, right? And that's normal.
That's
right?
life.
That's being a person.
Absolutely.
And so.
So I love my wife. I'm grateful for her.
And I do love my wife.
Honey,
Again,
if you're
we're going to be
listening
together
here,
forever.
please, yes.
I'll tell a story about my wife and my sister in a minute, but go ahead.
I guess my brother Justin's in a little different situation. He lives with my mom still in the house we grew up in, and I think he recognizes his limitations. He knows that he's not married. He knows that he doesn't have kids, and but he has embraced the role of Uncle Justin, and our family, all my siblings and all of my children and all of my nieces and nephews also embraced kind of the role of Uncle Justin. So his life is different than ours, but in many ways much simpler, and I hesitate to say easier, but he's not worried about some of the things that we are, and he's pretty good. He's worried about if the Red Sox lose, or he's worried about the Patriots starting quarterback, and he's worried about a lot of these things that might be more superficial for us, but are sufficient to keep him, engaged and thoughtful, and every day when the Globe comes out and he reads the sports page, he's got he wakes up every day like, all right, here's an exciting day for me, and in some ways it's not so bad.
Yeah. Especially during these times, I feel like that's with all the madness in the world, I feel like it's nice to just be focused on things that are not tied to the craziness, just the positive things in life.
Yeah.
And obviously, you have kids that are in school dealing with all that. It's stressful. So just not having to worry about any of that.
It's one of those things, and I remember this as a sibling, not as a parent, but that story where you're preparing to go to Hawaii, the whole trip, right? And you get off in the plane, and they drop you in Italy, right? You're like, oh, I only brought my bathing suit. I'm not quite ready for this Italian adventure. But guess what? The Italian adventure is pretty good, right? So it's definitely been that way for our family, and it's probably not what people dream of, but no one in our family and people I interact with regularly in kind of the community of people with intellectual disabilities, I think they all feel the same or very similar, where it's like, all right, this was not plan A, but this was a great plan, and look at all these things that we get to do now, and awesome. I love Italian food, so I think there's great trepidation if you don't know it, you don't experience it, but if you do experience it, then you can find um, all the silver linings and all of the unexpected benefits can more often than not outweigh the challenges and difficulties. So
Definitely.
Yeah. I think where my sister's concerned, I don't know that she understands what, you know, one might say she's potentially missing. I do know she fully understands, appreciates, loves the concept of family and friends and activity and life. I don't think she would have ever asked to move out and live in a group home and live independently, but I know she loved it. It was time, just like all of us, similar things. Mom's turning into the nag and, getting older and set in her ways, and my sister wanted to, do Zumba with friends. So, being able to move into a group home and do her day program is the right life for her. And I laugh because, although, again, for us siblings, sometimes it's hard, but in other ways it's rewarding. My parents are both gone, so for holidays, my sister would come to me, and slowly it turned from staying with me maybe for the Thanksgiving weekend to just the night to going home to, dinner was over and she's begging to go home, like maybe a normal sibling would, right?
Yeah.
I'm ready to get home. I want to see my friends.
I've had enough.
Take off my party dress and be done with it. So, I'm really happy for her. I think she feels fulfilled with that. I think the Pathway to Possible homes are fantastic. She's lived in 2 of them now. And the family feel and the camaraderie is fantastic, and I'm happy for her she has it. And just on a side note to what you ended with, and I'm sure we'll probably expand on it, even through the hard times, sometimes when you're trying to figure out, when you go to that mindset of like, oh, what they're missing out on. But when you look at it through the other lens, what we're missing out on. It can be so grounding to watch their life and what they appreciate and what really matters. And I love that. I mean, life is so fast for us now, and the pressure and the competition, and in some ways that's exciting and invigorating, but who doesn't appreciate a Sunday to just smell the coffee and watch the Pats game and have that be enough?
Yeah.
And that's definitely one of the things I've learned to appreciate, and she taught me, and I try not to take for granted.
That's good. And I definitely want to circle back to, obviously the things that you've learned from your sibling, but Jeff, I've been thinking about what Jeff said about his wife and Kim and a story. So I am curious. Obviously, we're all married here, and so a big part of getting married is bringing your sibling into your marriage. For us, Melissa, it's just us and our siblings. So, you're already the guardian of Annie, and I eventually will be the guardian of Jenny. And so, getting married and celebrating that time in your life, but then also introducing your spouse to a world of this is a responsibility that whether or not you're a guardian or this is a family member that is going to be around. And I think for me, my husband has embraced my sister from the start, and I think that was such a important thing when even growing up dating people. If someone didn't embrace my sister and treat her like gold, then I was like, okay, see ya. One date, you're out. So I think, I'm curious. I know, Jeff, you said you have a story of your wife and Kim, but I'm sure the relationships that your spouses have with your siblings are unique in themselves. And I mean, my husband adores Jenny. I feel like sometimes I'm like, you and Jenny need to go just hang out together, because I feel like, I get crazy, and, I sometimes am like, oh my God, like, I can't handle this right now. And I feel like he's just so patient, so calm, so amazing with her. And it's wonderful, because if I had met someone and they didn't embrace her and embrace that dynamic, especially considering, my parents are thankfully still around, but when I become her guardian, she's going to play even a bigger part in our life. And I think that's so important. So I want to hear your story.
So
Because you mentioned it.
I'm glad my mom has Alzheimer's right now, so that she doesn't hear this part. But like some mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, there can be challenges, and I think my mother always had challenges with my wife. And so early in our relationship, I remember a time when, within a month or 2 or 3 or something early, I went to saw my mom, and I think my mom really didn't like my wife from the get-go. She was a strong personality, and I think she really thought Jeff might marry this woman. This is a real threat. So that was an issue for my mom. And we had, I forget what the fight. We had some sort of fight about my wife, or at the time my girlfriend. And that's whatever. But Lori wasn't there, and I wasn't going to tell her about it. So I drove home, and I get home, and Lori says, "Oh, how was your visit with your mom?" I said it was fine. She said, "Oh, did I come up?" I was thinking, what? And I said, because I heard that I came up. I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, Kim called me." Now, Kim, of course, can't really speak very well. And, they had met maybe a handful of times. So what do you mean? Well, no, so apparently Kim called her after I left and told her the entire conversation in detail, which was telling for a bunch of things. One, it was obvious that somehow my wife could understand my sister, frankly, better than I can. And that's true to today. So there'll be times when I have trouble understanding. I'll say, talk to Lori. She's very good with people and really good at connecting, much more so than me. And so somehow Kim had told her this whole story, and that made this instant connection between my sister and my wife, which again continues to this day, and that's become like this famous story of Kim somehow transcending communication barrier, which also she does to this day. I mean, she gets her message across. Whether she's gotten good at writing things down. Now she'll make a shopping list, but she'll cut letters out, and it'll look like a hostage note from TV. Letters. And then she or Allison, her roommate, one of the other women who lives in the house, will take a picture and send it on the cell phone. And I'm like, I've got a hostage letter for but it's all like the shopping list of things she wants me to buy for her. Like, Kim, I'm not buying you $150 worth of stuff. Pick 2 things, but no, it's whatever your budget.
She likes to get creative.
Yeah. Do you get the Christmas list like in August, ready to go?
Well, it's funny because Kim is also incredibly generous. So, I mentioned she has like these 40 or 50 people. So the list is the list of people she needs to buy presents for.
Wow.
And so that she used to go out and shop with my mom.
Yeah.
And now we go out and shop, and it's she is much more focused on making sure she has presents, the right present for all of these people. It's pretty amazing.
Like, hey Jeff, you'll buy them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is good because I was unfairly portraying my brother Justin as this angelic figure. He's not exactly that way, and he has a customized Christmas list for each siblings.
Oh, that's awesome.
Some of them used to be kind of the hostage thing where we would cut things out of the Target thing, or we would cut things out of Bradley's or Kmart, or, these things from yesteryear. But they're always customized, and you could get him the most thoughtful gift ever, right? Or the most generous gift ever, but not on the list.
It's like, sorry, you'll have to return that.
You're better off buying, that's what I call music, volume 45, 46, 47, 48, than you would be buying him many things. So, anyways.
He has good taste in
top
hits.
If anyone listening here wants to borrow a DVD or a CD from the last 20 years, DM Brenda and get back to me because we have it at our house.
I mean, now more than ever,
right.
Being home, you gotta get those DVDs out, listen to some old top hits.
It was great when we had everything in VHS quality, and then we had to replace the exact VHS collection with DVD quality, and so anyways, we have a little technological junkyard at the family house, but it's part of the package, right? Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
And I would say in my situation, again, met my husband and knew him at college, so well before he met my sister, he knew of her. And I just think it's been, with my sister's limitations, I don't have the Jeff story in terms of probably the connection, but I think it's something he's appreciated, that it was not any part of his life in any way growing up, and just appreciating maybe if we hadn't met, maybe he wouldn't have. So it works well. It adds a nice dynamic, but I don't know that he would have any experience with special needs other than us.
So what about your kids? Have they, must have learned and know now, right?
Yeah, I think it's so an interesting thing for me was when I started having kids. My sister was already at Juniper House with Pathway to Possible. My mom was having Alzheimer's. She was probably halfway through her journey with Alzheimer's. So I was kind of, carting around 2 out of 4 kids at the time, beginning my guardianship with Annie, arranging, following my mother's situation. And again, would have my sister for the holidays or the random, beautiful weekend for a barbecue. And I started to realize, because of my sister's level of ability, the one thing is, she does recognize she'll never be independent. It is very important to her to have trust, whether it's being with me or a staff member. She would never be left in a house alone or anything like that. And I started to have toddlers. So suddenly I'd find myself in a situation where toddler runs. Mom has to chase toddler. Sister is freaking out. Because it's, are you going? Are you leaving? Where are you going? I can't keep up fast enough. If we went to a restaurant, it was, take the Brady Bunch into the bathroom. And that was hard because I realized I needed to kind of scale back or adjust how I was doing things. It did start to become a little more, if I was going to a restaurant, it was one-on-one with her. Or, Easter at my house became very low-key and just around the back patio. But I am amazed how well my kids have figured her out and connected with her. I mean, they make certain comments every so often that I would never think they picked up. My sister loves to just leaf through a magazine. And I remember at one point my daughter, who's my youngest, and so has never had an overnight stay or anything with my sister, made a comment, what do you think if Annie lived with us? And my oldest said, well, would have to get a lot of magazine subscriptions. So they pick up on certain things. And my sister was in a van accident a few years ago, and she lost a lot of teeth with it. And so eating needs to really be supervised. And at Thanksgiving time, I'm in the kitchen doing 100 things, and I can hear my boys, who early teens, it was probably painful for them to sit in the room anyway, dressed up. And I can hear them talking to her, pacing her, making sure she's only got one cracker at a time, and without me asking, and again, like I said, they could be your typical teen to me and whomever else, but when Annie comes in the room, it's a different ballgame. Yeah. And I'm thankful that they have that.
Yeah, I would say my boys have had a similar kind of education in terms of, they recognize that people on the spectrum of abilities, I mean, we call them disabilities, some people you need to be more thoughtful with and kinder of and patient with, and I don't see that on the household on a daily basis, but
it exists.
I do. I know that it exists underneath or is there because moments when they're with my brother and a friend of his or whatnot, you see a lot of that kindness. And so I've said it earlier, but I think people as a sibling with someone with intellectual disabilities, more often than not, you're going to see such the best part of people kind of in support and in concert with. And it's not always, but chapter and verse, I can tell you that people at my brother's job are incredibly kind and thoughtful and giving and send him gifts, and there's just, I don't get gifts from my coworkers, right? I'm an okay-ish guy, but Justin does. So I think that is, you would think, oh man, I have this obligation, because I have a sister or brother with, and there are certainly parts of that, but you have an incredible broadening where you see all of these other people and stakeholders and whatnot kind of step up and be kind and supportive. So it's I know that if you asked all my siblings, like, would you want Justin to be quote unquote normal? No, would be the answer, because we would not.
He wouldn't be Justin. He'd be somebody else.
Yeah, we would, and our family wouldn't be what it is, without him. So.
Yeah, I feel like that's huge, seeing where all of us are today and who the people that we've become based on our relationships and our, with our sibling. For me, my professional career is shaped around my sister. So I started volunteering with Special Olympics when my sister was, in her early teens, when I was in high school. Through college, I volunteered. I started a job in the for-profit space when I graduated. I started getting involved with Special Olympics again through fundraising events, and then got connected to them, started working there, worked there for just about 5 years, and then had my baby, and then decided to come back to the workplace, and now I'm working at Pathway to Possible, and I think I worked for an online retailer, I went to business school, and I mean, obviously what I did at Special Olympics and what I'm doing at Pathway to Possible is development, and it all ties into, business relationships. I, oversaw accounts at my previous job before Special Olympics, and, I'm overseeing relationships and building relationships in my nonprofit experience, but I don't think I would have worked at Special Olympics, would have volunteered, put in years of time to, being part of the Special Olympics world, and then coming on to Pathway to Possible. My sister's in a group home, and I want her to have the best opportunities for years to come, and I think I'm the person I am today, and my whole life is based on my experiences with her growing up, and it just molded me into the person I am today. And I'm sure there were times where I wasn't the best person or whatever it may be, but I feel like I'm who I am today based on those experiences with her, and I'm so happy and thankful for the experiences I've had over my life. And I'm curious, through your teenage, college, adult years, certain experiences that you have had that are shaped by your siblings.
I mean, I think when I was growing up, my parents are both social workers, and so I kind of assumed from an early age I'd be a teacher or social worker, although it didn't end up that way at all. But during high school and college, I spent 2 summers, or maybe 3 summers, working at summer camps for kids and adults with various disabilities. I worked at an Easter Seals camp in Virginia. I worked at Camp Arrowhead in Natick, which many of you may know. My sister went to both places, so it was kind of fun. I'd be working there a whole summer, and then Kim would show up for her 2-week session or 4-week session or whatever, and I'd see her some, and she was all excited. But then she'd do her own thing and have her own life, and so I mean, that was certainly part of growing up a little bit, or young adulthood. But and then I stumbled into business and sort of stayed there, and I've really enjoyed it. But those are great memories of those kind of unusual places, and I think particularly the Easter Seals camp in Virginia. It was rural Virginia. It was far away. It was totally isolated, and it was an amazing program. They were bringing in, for 1 week or 2 week sessions, completely new groups of kids and adults of all different ages and experiences and different types of disabilities. And it was just the way that we were trained and we learned to sort of work with such a varying population of people was wonderful.
I don't know. Next question.
What do you think, Melissa?
Well, I could say that, so we grew up in Newton.
Yep.
I guess somewhat similar to Jeff. I did in high school years work with Newton Rec Camp for special needs. And I really enjoyed it. It was a great group of counselors, many of whom were siblings as well. It was a great connecting point for me and my sister. As I got to college, I remember, we all know the infamous Carol Beard and whatever, you need to get into education, you have such patience, and I thought, nope, been doing that, it's kind of the separation of home and work. I'm good with all that at home, but I likewise went into accounting, kind of just needed the black and white sanity outside the house, so it didn't take me there. But I did get involved, and I did really enjoy those memories, and felt it was, and met a lot of other residents of Pathway to Possible as well. So a lot of them, feel like cousins or what have you. So.
And I think those experiences volunteering, and I know, Brian, you've been involved with Special Olympics and have gone to Justin's many adventures through that. So, those types of things you probably wouldn't have done because you wouldn't have had a sibling that was getting these opportunities if that didn't present itself. And I feel like I'm going to start you with this next question. So obviously, throughout your life, Justin's experienced some really amazing things. Whether through Special Olympics work, what stands out to you as one of the best memories you have with him together, whether it's at an event or traveling?
I would say my brother Justin is a big Boston sports fan, so I've had the opportunity through kind of my professional contacts to be able to go to games with him, and it's something that I take for granted, and a lot of people take for granted, but he doesn't. So every time you get to go to a game, there's like this special preciousness and the special gift of the moment. And so if we're at a Red Sox game or we're at a Bruins game, or there was just like this, in some ways, kind of child's eyes, he's seeing it for the first time, and it's so exciting. And we just had a Bruins game. Remember when we could go to live sporting events? Wasn't that really good?
Feels like centuries
Yeah, that
ago.
was great. I took him we went to a Bruins game after Thanksgiving, so it's kind of a dated reference, but he made a concerted effort to be up on the Jumbotron, and when he finally got up on the Jumbotron, I have this great photo of him like this, and the Jumbotron's in the background, and it's just, I think we're lucky to share a lot of shared experiences, and I think whatever your sibling situation is, whether you have one sibling or you have multiple siblings, what's important is the memories that you share together. And so he is, and by no means deficient in any ways, because we've had a lot of chances to do things like that, and so whether it's the Red Sox or the occasional Patriots game, or it's always exciting, it's always appreciative, and those are special memories for sure.
That's great. I'd like to hear, Jeff and Melissa, your, proudest, most special memories too.
One memory, it was only maybe 6 or 7 years ago, my much younger cousin got married in Seattle, and we all flew out. So my mom and her husband and my sister and my brother from Denver and myself, we were all out there. There's a bunch of family stuff and wedding stuff, and so it was all lovely and everything. But there was one day free when we decided, just me, my brother, my sister, to just take off, and we went into downtown Seattle, and I think it was called the Experience Music Project, which I think has changed. But it's like this sort of rock and roll museum kind of thing. Like one of the founders of Paul Allen or something from Microsoft set it up. It's like this huge, it's got all these Jimi Hendrix guitars and all these kind of things you can look at. But in addition, they have all these interactive exhibits where you can play music or do stuff. And then the culmination of the thing is you can book a time to go into like sort of like a recording studio, and you go into this like stage, and there's drums and guitar and synthesizers and bass, and you pick up an instrument, you start playing, and they film you. Now, we're none of us have musical talent. I mean, Kim may be more talented than me and my brother. We're terrible. My brother played bass now a little bit. But, we did a song, and they film it, and then they make a picture of it. And so, in fact, I'm just getting that frame now. So I dug it out. I had forgotten about it, and then dug it out of an old album, and so I've got a big version of it like this. But that's a great memory, and the picture of the three of us, the picture looks pretty good, but we really don't know what the hell we're doing. And so
but just having the photo.
Yeah, and I think it was also just the three of us sort of going through the city together and enjoying. We went on the subway or the trolley, whatever it is in Seattle they get around with, and just kind of doing that kind of tourism thing was something we don't get together as much, and just ourselves. It was really great fun.
Well, mine probably has a little different twist to it, because we, again, sort of due to my sister's functioning level, my parents were older, and therefore, when I hit high school, my dad was ill, and my mom started to get sick not that much longer after. So I have kind of more, my memories that I appreciate most are kind of the comic relief moments. My sister's 4'11", maybe 100 pounds. So everyone just thinks, oh, she's so easy and this and that. But you know, those times when you warn someone, no, she really doesn't want to do that. She's not going to do it if she doesn't want to do it. You know, oh no, no, we'll figure it out. And the person that doesn't listen then realizes, oh my God, she's strong as an ox and she's not going to do this. And I could go on and on with various examples of that. And those are the things I think of where that's her inner spirit, and that's how she exercises her independence. And if the P2P staff were here, many of them could relate because we've been at appointments saying, this isn't going to happen. Let's, we kind of sip. It's almost like pour the glass of wine. Let's all watch and see what's going to happen. And that always kind of just brings a smile to my face that, yeah, she's not standing on the sidelines. And that's good.
Well, it's amazing how she can get her point across.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and
stand
she
her
can.
ground.
Yes,
even,
she can.
Yeah, in every way that she can show it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I'll share my proudest moment I have because I feel like it stands out considering she made everybody at my wedding cry. So my sister, as I mentioned, socially she's very advanced. She'll talk to you and is very social, loves people, loves interacting. So this time for her has been exceptionally hard being home. But in terms of like her reading, writing, what at her school level, she's probably, comprehension wise at the level of, first, second graders. So for her to write and read, it's always been a struggle for her. And so when I was getting married a few years back, my maid of honor, of course, and she, knew that she had to give the maid of honor speech. And so months before my wedding, she was working with a therapist at the time, and every time they would meet, they wouldn't even talk about her and her feelings. They would just work on the speech because she was so excited that she was the maid of honor and that she was going to share her speech. And I didn't know anything about the speech. Like my mom wouldn't tell me, she wouldn't tell me, and I just knew that she was going to be speaking at the wedding, and I was very excited to have her as my maid of honor next to me. And so she just prepared for months and months, and I was really excited in that moment, obviously, to know that she was going to share her speech. And we're at the wedding, we're up in Vermont, and it's like just the perfect day. We really lucked out, and everything's going perfectly. My sister comes up next to my husband and I, and she does this speech where I feel like it was almost like an out-of-body experience because she had worked so hard and had practiced. She had memorized it. It was 2 pages long, and she had memorized this entire speech. Everyone stood up, gave her a standing ovation. The entire wedding room was brought to tears, and it was just so amazing. I mean, thankfully I have the video, and I have it on my phone. I have it, part of my wedding video, but I was just so proud of her because I knew how hard she worked at it, and the fact that it was such a important thing to her. Like, she would talk about, she'd meet any of you and say, I'm my sister's maid of honor. Like, she was so proud to be my maid of honor, and I mean, I was so proud to have her there. And it's funny because she was obviously part of the bridal shower and all the things leading up to the wedding, and then a few of my best friends got married like a couple months after me, and then a couple months after that. And I feel like she loved being my maid of honor. She's like, oh, do I get to do she went to the wedding because my families were close, and I was like, oh no, Jenny, you're not in this wedding. You get to be part of it. It was just, that memory is just, and I'll have it forever, which, thankfully technology today allows you to have videos and photos, obviously, getting those special memories that you can cherish for life. And I think it's huge. And I kind of want to circle back to where we're at now versus when we were growing up, and just how much change there's been and acceptance there's been for kids and adults with disabilities. And I think within my career I've seen it, within just growing up. And I think Melissa and Brian, like your children, I think they're growing up in a time where all abilities are accepted. I feel like saying disabilities is a term that people are trying to phase out, because I think for us too, knowing people have disabilities and just not even necessarily seeing those disabilities, and understanding that you should be accepting of all. Like, there shouldn't be a situation like when I grew up and being on a school bus as a young child where people made fun of my sister. Like, that I feel like is almost phased out at this point, thankfully. And I feel like with all the opportunities there are pre-COVID, hopefully post-COVID times, it just makes me proud because I grew up, and obviously years before I was even alive, people with disabilities were institutionalized, and now there's group homes and Pathway to Possible, and I mean, it's working for Pathway to Possible and seeing all that we're doing during this time, it just makes me so proud to work for Pathway to Possible and to, see the clients like Kim and Annie. Like I was, at their house like a few times during, when we've been doing some filming, and just seeing how happy they are with all the activities we're doing. They may be home, but they are happy and they're thriving, and not everyone is. And I think that's, that's all we can ask, for them to be happy and live their best possible lives that they can. And if you guys have any final thoughts or questions that you want to ask the panel.
Want me to go? So you struck a chord. You're right. We've come a long way. I know in the environment we're in today, there's a long way to go. But one of the heart-wrenching stories my mom always used to tell me, of course, she did not think she was going to give birth to a special needs child. And the first thing she was asked, she was not told it's a girl, it's a boy. She was asked, are you going to keep her? And of course my parents were incensed, and of course they were, and it was a great life. And that's not the environment we live in today, and I'm thankful for it. I also think, because this is a sibling panel, I get a lot of, wow, must be a burden, especially with my parents gone. And one, in credit to my parents, they always told me this will never be your burden. Thankfully, they planned and what have you. But I remember, even as a dumb teenager, thinking, what are you talking about? Like, she's my sister, and whatever happens, happens. It'll get taken care of. Because really, the as we've said along the way, I mean, the benefit is so intangible and so lifelong. My sister has taught me the true definition of unconditional love. Everybody has limitations and quirks and whatever. And when you find someone for them, to be able to really live truly to that unconditional love, it's freeing. It takes such stress and empathy to really take a minute and think about someone else's situation, and how can you make them feel better or more fulfilled or get to that game or whatever. Those are hard lessons to learn unless you really kind of grow up in it. And now raising kids, I do realize the struggle of how do you teach empathy? You learn empathy by experiencing it. And so I feel lucky that I grew up in the situation I did and with my sister, because maybe I'm a better person for her,
Nice. Yeah, I would echo that. Like, you're lucky, or this is a gift, and it's not something that you had planned on or wished for, but you, as a sibling to someone with intellectual disabilities, like, it is such a unifying and connecting and heartening center that for me and my other siblings, and for my friends who still ask about my brother and check in on him, or my kids that understand and have learned from my brother, it's a strange, weird gift that you should be appreciative of. And I have seen now, like when I've had friends or introductions, oh, so and so had a baby and the baby has Downs, I'm like, that's awesome, because you don't realize what a differently rewarding experience you're going to have because of this, and you wouldn't have signed up for it, but now that you have it, you're going to get all these benefits and experiences you wouldn't otherwise have, and your life will be richer for it. So
I think partly because I think my sister's adopted, I sometimes think how lucky she's been. I mean, I think if she had frankly stayed in Korea, being born in 72, I think she would have been instantly institutionalized and had no life. And I think she had enough disabilities going on that without a lot of support, and over the years from my parents and from schools and the staff at Pathway to Possible, she's been able to continue to grow and develop and learn. That never would have happened. So I think she's been incredibly lucky. starting with with my mom just really advocating so much for services and programs and support, and then frankly Kim and her intense desire to be independent, which leads to conflict, but very typical conflict, I guess. But getting her out into the community early in her adult life. She's intensely driven to work. She loves it's a huge amount of being able to do, and this frankly the staff at Pathway to Possible in Orchard Ave, just enable a quality of life that certainly isn't perfect, has its frustrations, but is overall amazing. She's just very, very lucky to live in West Newton Square, walking distance to CVS, knows everybody in all the restaurants there. She's got her quirks. She's a slob. She's a mess. She's got way too many electronics that she needs a lot of help with.
If she needs some DVDs, she can go to
No, she downloads now. She doesn't do DVD. She's way high tech. But she's got a great life, and it's not only Pathway to Possible. That's a key part of it.
Yeah.
And I think, frankly, for me, knowing that she's got that kind of quality of life is really helpful to me too.
Yeah, and I feel like you feel like you're in a place of calm, knowing your sibling is going to continue to do well. We're all kind of in a little bit of a standstill, but knowing the opportunities that they now have and will continue to have, and it makes you feel at ease, especially to see how far we've come. I think it's huge. Thank you, Jeff, Brian, and Melissa, for joining me today. This has been great. I think this discussion doesn't happen as much as it should, and I really enjoyed speaking with all of you and hearing your stories and learning more about your relationships with your siblings. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.